The creator of Path of Exile, Chris Wilson, made an awesome video about dark patterns in video games that really inspired me to explore the perspective of a player, in this case myself, who's wanted to step away from games that use dark patterns or really manipulation tactics to get players to spend more or engage more time with the game. Now, Chris does an amazing job, obviously, providing the perspective of a developer, of somebody that's had to contend with using some of these dark patterns in gaming monetization or engagement tactics to keep players entertained or engage with the game. And he's kind of calling the alarm of, developers really have to stop their dependency on this, really have to stop pushing them so hard. We're getting to the point where actual government regulators are looking at these dark patterns and these tactics that game developers use and starting to put actual laws against them. So how did we get here? And what can you do to get away from playing games that incorporate dark patterns like these? I wanted to provide that perspective as somebody who, again, has been making a concerted effort to not engage with these manipulation tactics in video games. And I'm going to do that on the backdrop of Albion Online here, because I think it gives me a good example, a good splattering to talk about how I'm actually actively doing this right now. So in Albion Online, if we go over here to the activities tab, you can see some of these, manipulation tactics in full display. We have adventure challenges, daily events, faction warfare. All of these things are, basically things that you can invest your time into as a player to gain some rewards. And if you log in daily, or if you don't log in daily, rather, you might miss out on some kind of daily event, things like that, or you might not actually fill up your bar here to get your adventure rewards over here. Or if you don't pay premium, you might not get any of this. It gives a lot of FOMO to the player. But what I want to say, that obviously I'm playing Albion Online and enjoying it, is that I was completely able to ignore these systems and still enjoy the game. And that's really my metric for whether a game deserves my time or not. If I can completely ignore daily chore systems, battle passes, whatever kind of progression tracks the game wants to force me to be on, if I can ignore all those and the base game under that is still enjoyable for me, then that's a game that I consider worth my time. And for me, Albion Online was just that. The stuff that I was doing literally 2 hours into the game is the same stuff that I'm doing now: fishing, gathering, enjoying PvE, PvP, adventuring throughout the world, running into different little locations, something purple shiny, so that means I just made a lot of money, or I got some really cool drop of gear. And all of that was happening again at the very start of the game, from very early on. I felt that same kind of adventure magic that I still feel today, to 300 hours later. And I'm really not a fan of games that make you wait to get to that engagement. There's a lot of games that people will tell you, hey, it gets good 100 hours in. That is a propaganda tactic. It's an investment tactic. It's a dark pattern. It's telling you, or it's essentially kind of trying to get players to get highly invested in the game, get 100 hours of their life into the game. And then of course it's easier to gain consent, to get more money out of them. So I just don't like to engage with stuff like that. If your game isn't engaging and fun within the first 2 to 4 hours, then I don't think it's a game worth playing, or a game that I'm going to really sink my teeth into, because that's more than enough time for a game to show what it is it has to offer to a player, and then where they can take it from there. Additionally, something else that Albion does really well, and this is similar to Monster Hunter and Warframe, is that the actual game loop that the game introduces feels impactful and rewarding. A lot of games like Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, ZZZ, the actual game loops in the game, the stuff that you actually do in the game once you've spent a bunch of money purchasing these characters or these weapons, the actual game loops in the game aren't that rewarding. They give you little tiny pieces of gear or currency that doesn't even add up to a fraction of what you actually need. All of the actual progression and currency and things that actually help with building of your characters only come through the paid systems, the battle passes, the $5 so that you get these little rewards on every single login, the purchasing of multiple characters so that you can get copies and constellations. That's where the actual progression systems lie. Again, it's playing your wallet. You're not playing the game. And in Albion, it's not like that. I can go out into the world and you can see me here. I'm gathering this blue resource, and that blue resource is actually worth an amount of money that actually matters, right? We got 9,000 off of just that. You could imagine if I'm actually out here farming and I'm actually, while I'm doing this video, fishing, and I'm actually getting an amount of silver that is worthwhile to get, that I can actually purchase things in the game with and progress my character with. And then all of that compounds into the Destiny board, which is this kind of progression system similar to, very reminiscent of the Path of Exile board. But everything you do in the game gives you fame. And as you get that fame, you get these rewards on every single thing that you've ever kind of interacted with, basically, in the game. And all of that leads you to, new levels of things that you can gather, enemies you can defeat, dungeons that you can enter and actually be viable in, and PvP that you can actually engage with on a viable level. And all of that is really fun and compounds upon itself. So the base layer of the game, by interacting with just the game itself, gives a lot to be enjoyed. Whereas there's other games that really, if you interact with the game itself alone and don't interact with the paid systems, you're never going to get any meaningful progression out of it. I did want to make a caveat and say that the premium purchase in Albion obviously gives a ton of rewards. You get 3 days free when you log in and all that kind of stuff, and you try to make the most out of it. I tried to ignore this a ton too. I basically said, I don't care if I have premium. I'm going to continue playing and see if it's still fun. But again, because I get to, you don't need tier 6 weapons. You get tier 4s, and that's all you kind of need. Like this tier of equipment, you can purchase this really easily off the market. Every piece of gear is purchasable off the market with silver, and silver is this kind of like progression currency that allows you to buy these higher tiers of gear. You don't even really need to be crafting and spending focus points crafting stuff or whatever, which is what you get with the premium currency. The core parts of the game are accessible to free players, and often, like, tier 4 sets, which are the accessible sets to players, are fun to engage with, and that's what people might use in PvP zones to like go and scout out new gear. And then the coolest part is that simply by playing the game, I can run into a dungeon and I can get a better piece of gear out of it. I got this from a chest. I didn't get that from me purchasing it. So having the innate game, the base layer of the game, having those innate qualities where you can actually enjoy and run into what the game has to offer purely through playing the game is important. That has to be accessible. If it's locked behind a paywall, if it's locked behind a battle pass or some kind of progression system or some daily login rewards and things like that, that's really not that enjoyable. And it's not going to be, because it just is a telltale sign that the developer of the game is more focused on developing these systems than they are on putting content into the game that actually makes the game engaging. So that's all to say that, once you start seeing all of these patterns being used over and over again, you can learn to avoid them. You can learn to actively be aware of, hey, I'm not going to interact with this daily thing. I don't care if I miss a day. I don't care if I don't buy the battle pass or even interact with the battle pass tracks at all. I want to have fun. I want to have this recreational activity. I want to be able to enjoy the actual core parts of the game. And if they're not enjoyable unless I give them more and more and more money, then I'm just not going to interact with it. Now, obviously, if it is fun, you can see up here I have 16 days of premium. If it is fun, I'm fine giving them a bit of money because, like, they made a good game. I'm fine even giving them a good amount of money. I'm fine giving them a lot of money if I'm enjoying myself a lot. I spend a lot of money in Warframe purely out of convenience because I was already enjoying myself a lot, but I didn't have to. And I think that idea that you don't have to spend a lot of money on a game to progress, that you, at the point that you do it, you're just doing it because you actually just enjoy the game, and you might even be actively making the active decision of like, this developer kind of deserves me to pay something because I've been playing this game free, for a lot of free to play games, for example. Then that's kind of like the golden place you want to be at, where the game actually delivers a valuable, fun product, and you almost feel good about paying purely for that fun that you're already attaining, not for progression, not for just skipping a bunch of content for the sake of skipping a bunch of content just so that you can get to the next paywall, because that's what some games feel like. Kind of going back to the Hoyoverse games, a lot of the progression in the game just unlocks another layer of progression that you have to pay more for. So as you kind of get done progressing a character, the next thing you have to do to progress that character is usually more expensive than the last thing you had to do to progress that character. And it just becomes a game, again, about your wallet and not a game about your enjoyment and your fun and your recreation. It just becomes a different kind of system. It's a system for getting money out of you. It's a gambling system disguised as a game. And that's just really unfortunate that we've kind of gotten into that industry. So now let's say that you're completely aware of these systems and that you are going out of your way to avoid them as much as you can. Well, that's great. What's probably going to happen, and what happened for me, is that I found games I genuinely enjoyed. I genuinely just enjoy this. I just enjoy adventuring in Albion, running into these rare little resources, selling them for my silver, and then seeing what I can buy off the store that I haven't tried before. I'll switch up my gear. I'll try new weapons. It'll change the way the game feels. It's very reminiscent to me of Monster Hunter and what I love about Monster Hunter so much. You go on a hunt, you actually get an impactful amount of rewards, and then you can use that to change up your skills, your weapons, your, how you're going to interact with the game changes, and it keeps the game loop fresh. Even though I'm hunting another monster, or even though in Albion I'm just going out fishing again or going into a new dungeon or whatever, I'm going and doing the same thing, but I'm not doing it the exact same way. And the same thing is already fun, and now I get to add this kind of like layer of flavor into it as I change my gear, change my skills, change the way that I interact with the world and the enemies that I can fight or the things that I can find. And so all that produces fun. It produces things that are fun to interact with. When a game locks that behind progression systems that are pay to win, behind things that you have to pay for in order to get to the next level, energy systems that like arbitrarily tell you when to stop gaming, that you could just conveniently purchase more game time with real money. When those things are introduced, those are really all trying to hide the fact that there's no content in the game. That if you were allowed to interact with the game completely freely, you would eat up everything that game has to offer in probably an afternoon, because there's not enough content in the game. And they don't want there to be enough content in the game because they're more focused on making things that you can pay for. So as soon as you kind of start to be aware of these things, I think you start to have more discerning qualities about ways to spend your time, ways to spend your recreation, ways that are actually fun, that aren't predatory, that aren't taking advantage of literal gambling addictions and some of the worst traits of humankind. That's the stuff that really helps to improve your game time. When you become aware of what it is you're interacting with and how it is you're interacting with the stuff that you consume, the products that you consume, not just in gaming, right? Dark patterns in the context of gaming is what this video is about, because I'm replying to, or kind of responding or reacting to, Chris Wilson's video. But I mean, these tactics have been used in retail, online shopping. They could be used in cities. City planners use certain things to manipulate people to drive around a city in a certain way. Every single time you open your Google app, it gives you a certain route to your destination that, make sure that you don't go through nice neighborhoods or neighborhoods that would be more chilled to drive through than going and spending your time in gridlock freeway traffic, even though you would arrive at the same time, all because it's trying to manipulate you to get a certain outcome. And so the less aware that you are of how the world affects you, that easier it is for that world and the people that have jobs that they work 24/7 to make sure that they can manipulate you into doing something to manipulate you. You're easier to manipulate when you're unaware of how things in the world work and how things are trying to manipulate you than when you are. And honestly, the whole thing about manipulation is that it gets you to do something that you wouldn't have done otherwise with more information, right? Like that's kind of what manipulation is. And so having information and making sure that you're making informed decisions about not just what you're consuming, but how you're consuming it, that means that when you ultimately do make a decision, it wasn't because you were manipulated, you just wanted to make that decision. And at that point, that's completely okay. It's completely within your responsibility. But don't let games take advantage of you just because they're catching you with your guard down. When you're trying to take part in a recreational activity that is gaming, they're trying to manipulate you via behavioral psychology and propaganda tactics that honestly aren't even that smart, right? Like putting the buy button for a battle pass at the same place as the login button is not like some Lex Luthor level like 5D chess. Like that's just grimy, and that's just taking advantage of people that are just not paying enough attention to, again, like what they're consuming and how, and just taking advantage of them when their guard is down, when they're just trying to play some games. So I guess to kind of wrap up this video in terms of a conclusion and kind of summary of everything that I've been trying to talk about, I stopped really interacting with a lot of these, we call them dark patterns, maybe manipulation tactics, whatever, engagement tactics. I really stopped interacting with this. Like you could tell I haven't even finished this, and I have premium, but I don't really care, because my goal out of a game is not to finish some arbitrary route of progression. My goal is, am I having fun on the journey? Do I like the journey between A and B? Because I know when I get to endgame, there'll be nothing to do. I know that like there's a time that comes where there's no more content, or maybe I've just done too many things too fast. So if I'm not enjoying the journey between the first hour and the 100 hours, then that is my metric for dropping off a game. So stop believing that you have to spend 100 hours and then a game gets good. That's not a good enough excuse to give a game your time. Stop believing, like, they should cut out that 100 hours then just get rid of that, for God's sake. Stop believing that, you have to finish a battle pass to, because you already sunk so much time in. That's the whole point. They want you to easily complete the free battle pass so that you buy the purchasable one. Stop believing that you need to, like, keep track of daily login rewards. If they really cared about your daily login, then that 30-day reward, because it's usually every month you get, like, the final reward, would actually mean something, but it doesn't. It completely goes out of fashion like a month later. It doesn't scale into, like, anything meaningful. It might feel a little bit rewarding because it's maybe a little bit okay, but it's usually kind of just lame. Like, it's usually not a good reward. I remember in Genshin and in Honkai Star Rail, any of those login rewards, whatever, I never felt like they actually amounted to anything impactful in the long run. They were mostly just a waste of time and money to, have me logging in every day and have me kind of, like, glued to try to interact with them. So ever since then, I've just made this concerted effort to, like, if I'm not enjoying the journey, or the moment that I'm not enjoying the journey anymore, I just drop off. And the answer from the developer and the business behind that game is that they have to put more of their focus on the content in the game than on the monetization systems and the dark patterns that they are implementing. And I think as consumers and as gamers become more aware of these things and make better informed decisions about how they consume and interact with content, then these businesses will adjust. I often hear a lot of people say, like, well, these businesses have to make money. That's true, but these people are smart and they're making money the easiest way they know how. If you make it a little bit harder for them, I promise you they'll figure it out and it'll be better for everyone. You'll have better monetization because people can't get away with doing the same old crap. And they'll have a more meaningful job where they're not just taking advantage of people, but actually maybe innovating in different ways that we haven't been monetizing before, simply because these low-hanging fruit types of monetization and player manipulation tactics is what's been basically bearing fruit. So thank you so much if you watched all the way to the end. Really appreciate your time here, and thank you for keeping me company on this video. I hope to see you guys next time, and I just really appreciate, again, all of the comments that I always get, or that I've been getting on videos that always just give me a new idea for something to do next, because it's so I really appreciate that. With that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for joining me on the ramble.